Hello, this is Inside News. I'm Dale Matthews. I'm joined tonight by Mike Jones and by Dan DeYoung. We're all Type A personalities, so welcome to the A-Team. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you.
Nice to see you here. One of the things that we've seen during the run for commissioner, when it was so many candidates, 134 candidates on each side, all of the candidates were putting their best foot forward. They were only talking about themselves, well, with a couple of notable exceptions. We know who they are. And they were not berating anybody else. They were just talking about their positive sides. That's a very helpful thing. Now we've gotten down to a point where it's the binary question, yes or no. Do we vote for you? Do we vote for Keith Heck? Do we vote for Lily Morgan? Do we vote for Bill Hunker? And so one of the questions we keep getting asked is, what is the difference between the two candidates in this case? So tonight is an opportunity. We're going to put this on all the Facebook sites here, all the ones interested in politics at all. You won't be on the one where they're, talking about grooming cats for the most part. And this being the case, then, Dan, what is the big difference between you and Keith Heck?
Well, I think number one, going forward, and I guess it is part of what my campaign, from time to time I mentioned it, I feel as though, I'm going into my background, I with the United States Navy, and of course Keith, I believe, was U.S. Marine, so we're very similar in other than the food we had to eat. I think I had a little bit better child than he did when I was in the military. But I think our military background is probably fairly equal, in the basic training. In other words, respect and this and that, the chain of command and things of that nature that you learn in the military, we're about equal in that. One of the things that I find to be a real big asset, and I, in a lot of cases, is missing in governing bodies, and this is across the nation all the way up clear to the White House, is a lack of business experience. And I was in business. I worked for a company here in town, a local heating and air conditioning company, for 9 years, and worked my way up to service manager. And we had a rather large crew that we were running, and that I was in charge of. Plus, a lot of all the stuff with customer relations, and you had to get along with the public and field objections and field comments and field criticism and everything, and still do it with a smile on your face. But all the while moving forward to help the company get better and work its way out of any predicament that it got itself in and any controversy that came up. Then in 1981, I started my own business, and then you basically, when you start your own business, you are putting everything you've ever earned and a good portion of everything you ever hope to earn on the line. And that right there changes the dynamic dramatically to where, and I'm not saying you have to knuckle under and be nice to everybody, because you know what? Some people you just can't be nice enough to, but you pick and choose your battles along that line. And having been in business for, since 1981 until just recently, you learn an awful lot, and you learn an awful lot about management skills. You learn a lot about human nature, because you are a person's employee. You basically, and I try to keep this all the whole time I was an employer, I tried not to pierce that veil and get chummy and buddy with employees, because you don't know the day that you may have to let them go. So I'll take a breath for you there real quick.
Well, Mike had mentioned something to Dan, and so did I, about the idea that with the way the technology here works, him coming in on telephone, sometimes he can't hear when we're saying something in agreement or asking a question or whatever, and so he happily agreed to take a breath every once in a while so all these Type A personalities can talk.
And listen, I'll agree with Dan on when you start a business, it does change your world, because you go from being a guy who gets his paycheck every Friday and has his weekend to himself, to somebody who has essentially no time to yourself. And until you learn how everything functions, there may be weeks where your employees take home more money than you do. And, while you're waiting in between payments on a contract, you're paying your employees out of your bank account, and it does change your perspective. And you also live with that business 24/7. You wake up in the middle of the night thinking about, the implications of decisions that you're making and logistics. And so I believe that is important to have that kind of experience, serving the public.
Now, Dan, going to make it as easy as possible for you to say happy, good things about yourself and draw a contrast without sounding egotistical. Nobody wants to do that, obviously, and we're not trying to get you to do that. There will be a difference, I think you will agree, between someone that comes from a charitable organization that is reaching out a hand to those that need more help, and someone that comes from a slightly harder nosed business type of background. Can you talk to us a little bit about the difference between the person that runs a charity and the person that runs a for-profit business?
Well, and as Mike said, you learn to eat, sleep, and drink your business, and because it is your livelihood, it is everything. I have every time I went to work in the morning and opened that door, I knew what my cost of doing business was going to be for that day. And I knew it was my personal responsibility to make sure that amount of money either came in the door or was already in the door. And there's a big difference, when you work and I worked for a fairly large company, but I always, how do they say in the old cowboy days, I rode for the brand. And, I was very, very cognizant of everything that went on. And if one of my guys did something, like blew the transmission in the truck, I took that personally, and it wasn't even my truck. When it becomes your truck, then all of a sudden it takes on a whole new dimension, because guess what? The money you thought you had at the end of the month, there were many times that I opened up my checkbook and there would be like $15,000 in my checking account. And the first thing that came to my mind was, who did I forget to pay? That can't be my $15,000.
That's right.
So
that's right. I have too much money here.
But, when go ahead.
He was agreeing with you.
Oh, okay. So from to that end, and I was here for a lot of years, and I explained to my employees there were days that I did not take a paycheck in order for them to get their paycheck. As just Mike said, sometimes when you're in the contractual world, you seem to be the last guy in line, and in the construction business, all of a sudden the general contractor wasn't going to pay, not because you weren't done with your facet of the job, but because the landscaper wasn't done. He can't get a draw until the landscaper does. There's always something. But you know what? It's, there was a lot of good things being in business. One of the things that I will point out, is that when you're in business in a retail service business, even if you run a hot dog stand, you have got to prioritize daily as to what is important to you, and what, you can sometimes say, well, a trip to Disneyland is really important to my family. But then all of a sudden the business guy taps you on the shoulder and says, yeah, but you've got payroll taxes coming up, or you have payroll coming up on Friday, or you have Christmas bonuses coming up. It's always something. So you have to really learn to prioritize. And I don't know whether, when you're in the community, what is the word for that? It's called a community organizer style of business. I don't know how much prioritization really comes in on a day-to-day basis. That's one of the major differences. And I don't know how many, I could probably go back through history and figure out, because we're talking about county commissioners here, of how many county commissioners actually were in business for themselves, or, high up in a company and had to sign the front end paycheck rather than the back side of the paycheck on a routine basis. Changes the dynamics immensely. And when you have employees, that's another thing. You really, you start picking and choosing and figuring out how you can get the very best employees and then keep them working for you so they don't go to work for someone else. So I'll breathe again.
Now, you've been the president of the city council now for a while, and that's an unpaid position. Now you're going to potentially be the new commissioner, which is a paid position. Do you imagine that that's going to cause any kind of difference in the way that you look at your job?
No, and I knew going into the city council side of it was voluntarily. I went in with both eyes wide open. I knew it was voluntary. And as I've been there for basically 6.5 years, almost 7 years. And of course, the longer I have been there, and as I took on the responsibility of council president, that adds a new dimension to your responsibilities, because now you have to be there for if a counselor has a question about the process or what is the system development charge, could you please explain that to me? You have to pretty well be there as kind of a sounding board for the council also. Also, as council president, you sit into the meetings every other week with the city manager, the assistant city manager, and the mayor to establish the agenda and what I would bring forward to the council when the councilor wants to look at this at a workshop level or bring it to the actual meeting level. As far as being paid or not paid, would I continue on it? And I've made this statement because I've had people ask me, well, if you're unsuccessful at the primary level for commissioner, will you be running for city council again? And I told them, no, I would not. I guess I could say it's time that somebody else got the privilege of serving their community like I have. But it is a tough job. I'm not kidding you. It's a very time-consuming job. So it takes a special person, to want to serve. And then when they tell you, you don't get any money out of this, you go, I still want to serve. And, volunteers, volunteers understand what I'm talking about because they have a passion for, like the Urban Area Tree Committee. That's a complete volunteer committee, but you know what? Those people show up every month at the meeting and they have bright ideas and things they want to get accomplished. So I think that's kind of the difference between a volunteer and, gee, I'm in it for the money. I just think that my experience with government, it's not just city government. A lot of people like to think, well, you know about the city, but you don't know anything about the county. Well, I'm sorry. You can't help but be tied into county issues and state issues through the Oregon Department of Transportation, the Middle Road Metropolitan Planning Organization, things that I do belong to right now that I've been on their boards for years. And you can't help but leave your jurisdiction at the door and step up to a broader spectrum. And that's tough to do when you're just a volunteer. But it's a requirement for what I've done for the last 6 years.
Will people be able to tell the difference between your stand about raising property taxes and that of Keith Heck?
Oh, I think they will. Yes, I think that's going to be. I am sure that Keith and I kind of kept an eye on Keith, and I serve on some things at Chamber of Commerce, for instance. We have a policy, a political decision-making thing once a month, and Keith and I serve on that. We bump into each other, in a normal course of the day quite often. And I can positively say that I will have a different management style than Keith Heck does, just strictly because of our background. The difference is in our background. He handles a crowded room way different than I handle a crowded room. Some people are not comfortable in a crowded room, and other people just walk around freely and talk to anybody. And so there's, I think there will be a remarkable difference, and that's one of the you're asking for differences. And I think the management style of Keith Heck and myself are going to be totally different.
Of course, the question I asked was about the property taxes. Will we see a difference in your attitude toward property taxes than that of Keith Heck? And then Mike has a question.
Well, property taxes, what's going to happen on the property taxes is they will have to be brought up from the people. I think, the people have spoken a number of times that they're not interested in property taxes. I'm very interested as to the reason why. I think I've got a pretty good handle on why, because they don't trust the Board of County Commissioners, and that trust is something that can't be, the level of trust that's there right now is something that cannot be unwound and untied in a short period of time. That's a long-range goal that I think the whole BCC needs to take a real careful look at, and ask why. Just say, why don't you, and then get to the root of that. And I think that, and they say, well, property taxes, and I'm not gonna pull a George Bush here and say no new taxes. But I also have to. I'm concerned about the people that have the money in their pocket. They wish to buy some form of, contribute. They know they can. Now, there's a lot of people out there that can't contribute because they just don't have the money. But there are people out there that say, I want to buy, I want to contribute to public safety and to criminal justice and the jail and the sheriff and, the juvenile justice system. And because the vote came back no, it was relatively close. It gets farther apart as we go on with this thing. But I don't know if that's strictly because it was $1.40. If it was one of the other candidates, I believe Tony Webb had an idea that at 99 cents would have worked. And you talk to people, well, $1.40 was too big a bite to take. 99 cents would have been more. Could you have gathered 4 or 5% or 10% or 8%? It would be to push the needle one way or the other. That's something that's certainly up for grabs and go from there. But I think the biggest thing here is that there's just been an extreme lack of trust in government all the way across the board. We see it in the city too. I mean, that's not new to anybody. It's all the way to the national level. We see it all the way up. State level, it doesn't matter. I think our country is going through a very, very, very fundamental change, and I don't know if it's a fundamental change for the better or not.
Mike?
I'm glad you mentioned property taxes. We'll go away here in just a second. Now, there is one thing for sure. Property taxes in this city are going up, and they're going to go up substantially. Now, they may not be going up in the form of a property tax, but they will go up in some form, either on your water and sewer bill, because you guys are about to consider spending $300 million on infrastructure. And I did the calculations. If you're borrowing that over 30 years, you're essentially, and at a very, very favorable interest rate, you're going to be paying about $1.5 million per month on the payment for that. That ultimately, I did some calculations. If you're only spreading that amongst the people in the city, you're talking about $428 per year per person. If you've got a mid-range home, $300,000, something like that, you're probably going to be paying. And this is weird because if you put it on the water and sewer, it won't actually work that way. It'll be based on usage. But bottom line, you're going to be paying $2,000 probably more every year than you did before. And additionally, if you've got, a commercial building, which I do, and if your valuation is, let's say, it's a couple of $1 million, you're going to be paying about $5,000 more every year for property taxes. And, I don't know ultimately what is going to happen with the economy going forward. But if there's one thing I know, if you want to damage an economy, suck money out of it. And that's what this thing is going to be in my book. So in your view going forward, protecting and nurturing the economy of Josephine County, how do you make that, which you won't have any control over as a commissioner because that's a city thing. But I mean, how do you see that? Is that beneficial going forward?
Well, if I took what you just said at face value, I would say you're absolutely correct. But there's an awful lot of things that you just said that aren't entirely true. What the city council is doing right now is we are updating all of our plans, our master plan. Okay? Mm-hmm. We have one for wastewater. We have one for water distribution. We have one for stormwater. We're getting ready to do a stormwater master plan. Right. Master plan is nothing more than you sitting at home saying, you know what, I'm very comfortable in my brand new house, but in 25 years I'm going to need a new roof. And you say, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take $15 a month and I'm going to put it in a thing for roof repair. I believe if you rent your building out, a certain amount of the rent coming in is for, what do they call it? Capital replacement fund. And for instance, I rent in an industrial park, and the gentleman that owns the industrial park, part of the rent that I pay him is going for roofs on the very building that I'm in that actually has a brand new roof on it. But he is planning for the future and saving money for that. I know it's $300 million, and I understand that if you took every project that's in all of those plans, it does add up to $300 million. None of those right now are funded. Mm-hmm. I want to make sure everybody understands that. We are not spending that money. We're not going to the people and saying, okay, we're going to slap you with $300 million. And this is the perception that's out there, that that's what the city council is doing. And the city council is doing nothing more than reviewing the 3 master plans that are associated with infrastructure.
Yeah, but wait a minute. Is it or is it not?
Go ahead. I'll breathe.
Oh, thank you. Go ahead, Mike.
Is that not a plan to spend up to $300 million? And by the way, it's not at all clear because the conflicting reports as to whether or not the water distribution system includes the water plant. I've heard that it doesn't, which is another $100 million. And then you're talking or up to $100 million, depending on who you talk to and what day it is. And then also there's the urban renewal project, which is up to $105 million. I mean, this is crazy spending here. And ultimately, if you're talking about doing these things and you're talking about doing them over the next 30 years, sooner or later, that amount of debt or whatever amount of debt is needed to finance these things is going to be sitting on the city, for which they will have to make a principal and interest payment.
Yes, you are assuming, are we ready? You're assuming you're going to either go borrow or take to the taxpayer every bit of everything we're doing, and we're going to do it all at once, or even if we do it over 30 years. Each one of those projects is brought to the council on its own merit. Whether or not, first off, all of them need to be prioritized, and we haven't done that yet. So, I think everybody's jumping the gun here, and when you throw the figure out that a water treatment plant is going to cost $100 million, no, it is not. The number that's being bannered about when it first started out was $56 million for a complete new plant and to hook that new plant into the existing infrastructure and be up and running, and away you go. That was when it was 40-something million gallons a day. And we said, there is no way we need that much. So the city council has sent it back through a task force. This has gone through 2 or 3 task forces, of which Carl Wilson, I believe, was on one, Colleen Martin. There's a lot of people that have been on those task forces and heard the entire thing, not just what comes out at the end of the day with a bunch of people when it's 80 million here. No, it's 100 million. No, I heard it was 300 million. No, I heard it was this. And that happens all over the place, because that's the way Grants Pass is. You can burp at one end of town and end up, when it gets to the other end of town, you've thrown up all over your wife. So I think everybody needs to just take a step back. This is all and like I say, these are all plans. There is not one bit of this that's funded. Taxes haven't gone up one bit. You are right, but you guys deal with this every day in the schools. You're looking at I tack on what the school board said they wanted to do with North and South Middle School. They want to build 2 new of those. What do you think, the money's going to fall out of the sky or come from the teachers union from that? No, it's not. It's going to be in the form of a bond, or you're going to sell bonds or whatever they're going to do. They're going to bond out. They're going to borrow the money, and yes, you're right. It does have to get paid back. but they're not going to borrow the full amount because they're going to get money from other sources. So I think everybody needs to take a step back, take a deep breath, and instead of going around and keeping, fanning the flames of mistrust in government, there's a whole bunch of things. There's system development charges. There's all kinds of things that come into play here. There's government grants. But the first thing that has to happen process-wise is these projects need to be put onto a list, and they're called master plans. I was at I'll take a breath, and then I want to tell you one thing real quick, Mike, that happened the other day. Can I take a breath, and then I come back on?
Yeah. Yes, of course.
Well, hang on. Let me follow up. Unfortunately, when I don't talk for a long time, my echo begins again. That's irritating. Now, system development charges, I'm very, very interested in what those are, what the definition of those is. And my understanding of them is that when a new business is coming to town, they pay a certain amount for the infrastructure that is going to be hooked up to them, and it's an inflated fee to help cover the cost spread around with some of these projects that you're talking about. And if a contractor wants to build a new subdivision, all the infrastructure that goes in there, and there's some sort of a system development charges that on top of that, which is kind of an economy killer, if you ask me. But that is your safety valve to take some of the pressure off of the citizens for having to pay the full freight of all of this. But it's also a dangerous thing when you lump that on top, and then businesses who are coming here look at that and go, okay. Maybe we'll set up business in Medford or something like that. So what is the definition of a system development charge, and who pays it, and how much can you expect to glean off of that?
Okay, you're pretty close. You're hitting pretty close, Mike. And what a system development charge is, for instance, and I'll use probably the worst case scenario would be a drive-up restaurant, say, and I'll throw Taco Tree. So a Taco Tree wants to move in, and they want to move into the old DMV building down there on F Street. The DMV building already has a drive-through, so there has been system development charges when that building was built. There is a manual out there, Stratfish manual, that decides it has categories for different things. And it says if you are a DMV, you're going to create so many trips per day on the existing system. And basically what it amounts to is it says, if you're going to put that many more traffic on there, the street's going to wear out a little bit sooner. So therefore we have to get a little bit per trip in the system development charge moving forward to make up for your impact that you just brought to existing system. Now, if you're a drive-through restaurant and you are going into virgin territory where there's never been a drive-through restaurant before, you're going to have a lot of trips through that drive-through and into the restaurant, in and out. And so that number is going to be fairly high. And that's when it does get expensive. In-N-Out Burger, for instance. There was a gas station on that piece of property, so there's a certain amount of trips that have already been paid for, and those trips stay on the books as a credit towards that piece of ground. Now, the use changed from gas station to drive-through restaurant, so there is a calculated difference between those two usages, and that's the part they're going to pay on system development charges for transportation. Now, there's other system development charges. There's park system development charges. There's transportation. There's stormwater in certain areas that have stormwater usages. Some areas don't use stormwater. So it varies throughout, but you're absolutely right. And we keep an eye on that. That's one thing about system development charges in this city council is it keeps a very, very close eye on it because it can definitely put a wet blanket on development. You and I both know that. And as people do check, because from time to time we send a model set of plans to our surrounding communities to see if we're within the range or if we're high, low. Are we in the, if you were going to be a dental lab move here from Boise, Idaho, and you wanted to be on the South I-5 corridor, where do you stand? Do I move to Medford? Do I move to Grants Pass? Do I move to Roseburg? what are your system development charges for me to build that building? And they will vary from community to community based on what their future need is going to be. And they can only be used for the portion. In other words, if say for instance that subdivision you're talking about, and the water line out in the street is an 8-inch, and because the subdivision needs a 12-inch line because of their future existence, that line needs to go from an 8-inch to a 12-inch. System development charges can be used for only the difference in cost between an 8 and a 12. It can't be used to replace the 8-inch. You see what I'm saying? The 8-inch is already in; it's already been paid for. So therefore, you can't raise that by a 12-inch amount, only by the difference between those two.
You said that at one of your meetings recently.
Go ahead.
You were saying that at one of your meetings recently, one of the city council meetings recently.
If I might just suggest, Dan, that if they don't want people to be running around town saying, hey, it's 300 million, hey, it's 300 million, maybe they should not float 300 million. One can only speculate as to what their motivation for doing that. Perhaps it's a trial balloon to see how the community is going to react to that. And by that, then they'll figure out how much money they're ultimately going to plan to spend of the people's money. But
go ahead, Mike. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm just saying that you could avoid a lot of these problems by don't float a $300 million number if it isn't 300 million. Go talk to the water engineer guy as he walks through the plant and makes notes of what's there, and he comes up with an estimate of what it's going to cost. Put that out. And I understand why they float more money, because they want padding. They want so they can suck a little money off and throw it over into the Department of Donuts and Coffee or something. I understand how government works.
And before Dan reacts to that,
think, come on, don't do that.
Okay, before Dan reacts a lot to that, Dan, you've been dealing a lot with system development charges. You've been dealing with the challenges facing the city. Now you're looking at becoming a county commissioner. What of that skill set are you likely to bring ideas about system development charges and business licenses to the county? How does that translate into a county commissioner position, which puts you in a different position running against Keith Heck?
When you get to the city, and the city and the county are two different things, because the only thing that the county really supplies to the taxpayer is roads. The road system. We have a street system inside the city. You have streets, water, sewer, police, fire. None of the above out in the county. None of the above.
Jail system.
There is no water system out there. There is no sewer system out there. There is a park system, yes. And and you have your transportation system, your road grid through public works. But there's a vast difference between the two. The two budgets are, although they're very close in amount, but they're two different, completely different forms of it. So when you say, well, you're going to think about doing system development charges for the county, I don't know. You have to be really careful. And Mike, you mentioned, well, it's going to go to the donut and coffee fund. There are finance laws, state finance laws, and we go through an audit every year, as does the county. And you go through that audit. You just don't take water money that you've charged to a water patron and say, I'm going to go put a stop sign at the corner of 4th and G. That doesn't happen. These are different silos of money, and they're very, very careful to not do anything. The only thing you can really mess around with is discretionary funds in the general fund, and that isn't very big in either one of those entities. You have to take care of business, and that's one of the things with the prioritization. You have to take care of business day to day, and in other words, you can't charge the sewer patron and charge him for sewer for taking care of his sewage, and then turn right around and say, "Oop, we're going to buy 2 new cop cars with it." That doesn't happen.
All right,
or I know that everybody would love to think it makes really good drama, kind of a Housewives of Orange County thing, but it doesn't happen. And there's a lot of speculation. It's been going on for years. Oh yeah, well, I know what they're doing with that money. you know what? Very few of those people ever show up to budget
funding of
meeting.
sheriff, funding of the sheriff, Mike.
Yeah, we're funding jail beds with it right now. That has nothing to do with water and sewer.
No. You're not. Now this is what I want you to understand. That is a utility fee. It is not connected to your water. You get it on your water bill, but you also get your school bill on your property taxes bill you get from Josephine County. So you take the whole thing, and instead of saying Josephine County only gets 58 cents, you're saying, well, by golly, my bill was $896 last year. But how much of that does anybody really, and it's by design, Mike, that very few people read their tax statement and very few people read their utility bill.
I do.
And on your electric bill's got a blue sky program in it. It's got a remove the dam program and a save the fish program. It's only 40 cents or 20 cents. You just pay the number at the bottom of the line and you're happy. You're not happy with it. But you know what? You really need to dissect it and see exactly what it is. When you get your slip at the restaurant, I did it the other day. I was at a restaurant and I read my slip that I got. And I said, ma'am, we didn't have 2 sodas. I had water. Because I read that, sure, my bill was $38, so I read what I was being charged $38 for, and I urge every taxpaying citizen to do the exact same thing with their tax bill, your electric bill, and you say that we are taking water money. It is on the utility bill. It's called a utility fee. It's perfectly legal, and what we did is we used it to fund jail beds, and it's extremely popular inside the city because why? We pay taxes to 40% of the taxes that we pay for county property taxes goes towards that jail. And guess what? We pay again, but you know what? People in the city of Grants Pass, they're saying, do it again. Do it again. We want the jail bed.
Okay, Dan, you were talking about silos of money and that you can spend money on this and you can't spend it on that. There's no cross-pollination. One of the things that's happened with the roads fund that's been set up by the state is that they've said you can, and Josephine County has, you can take this and you can help fund sheriff patrols, only road patrols, with that. Now, you probably know what happened at the recent budget meeting where one of the budget committee members said, gee, shouldn't we be putting any of this towards more road patrols for the sheriff? And the rest of the county budget committee said, no, we're absolutely, definitely not going to do that. Are we likely to see a difference between you and Keith Heck and the other 2 county commissioners on this particular subject of taking that windfall money that came in, which ended up being $1.5 million, and spending it on sheriff's patrols? Difference between you and Keith Heck.
Okay, I think we've touched on this before in one of your previous shows.
Yes, we did.
We brought that up once before. You said, okay, what about that $1 million? Would you move that $1 million over there? And I explained to you that there's only $2.5 million in the emergency fund in public works anyway. Curry County had close to $20 million, and of course they've wiped that out with that hole in the ground over there because they really needed it. Now there are some good financial practices, and I have not been into the county's budget yet, but there are good financial sound practices that need to be adhered to a certain extent. And one of those is having reserve, and having that reserve, especially in the public works department, because you don't know what's going to happen. And so we don't have a huge general fund that say, okay, we have a $10 million bridge washes out, and it's $10 million to replace it. Have 2.5 in the emergency fund, and $7.5 million got to come from somewhere to get a bridge back up and running again. We don't have the luxury of having $30 million in the general fund and discretionary fund. Just say, well, okay, we'll scoop a little bit off there and try and funnel it over there. There's got to be some really responsible thinking when it comes to that budget. Now, I hear what you're saying. You're saying, well, it can go over there. I understand it can, but it doesn't have to go over there. That is up to the Board of County Commissioners and the sheriff, too.
Yes, it is.
So the sheriff has to ask for it, and I don't know if the sheriff did.
No, he didn't. And Dan, a related question to that is, Keith Heck says that we're in a law enforcement emergency situation. Dan, are we in a law enforcement emergency situation? Is it an emergency?
I think if it was a true, I think we've got a problem. Don't ever underestimate that I think that everything's just fine out in the county and everything's fine with patrols and that we have an adequate sheriff's department. Don't ever say and twist my words to say that I think it's adequate, because I don't think it is.
Okay.
I think Sheriff Daniels has done a job with what the amount of money he's got. He's staying within his budget, and this time, can he have a better, higher level of service if he had more money? Yes, he can. Is he operating within his means? Yes, he is. But, to say, well, is this going to be different? Well, I think there's a whole bunch of different ways to go about this. And maybe if there was more faith in the government and less skepticism and more of that trust we were talking about earlier in the show, if that can be demonstrated to the voting public, there's a good possibility that maybe they would put 50 cents on their property tax voluntarily. Or they would put 50 cents on there and say, please bring that to us, because we'll go ahead and pass that and help the sheriff out, because property taxes goes to the sheriff. But to say, okay, we're going to take it out of this one, take it to that one because we can, and shift around, I would actually have to sit down with Public Works Director and say, okay, what is this and why is it and how is it, and the sheriff in the room and your department head. That's exactly what that's all about. But, we could throw stuff around. I could do that in my own home. I can certainly justify buying an engine for my car. But my wife and I had to buy a TV set today. I mean, this is today. I just got back from purchasing a new TV set for my home, and that took money out of my engine fund. But, that's family funds. I don't take money out of the family unit and go buy engines, but I do take money out of the family unit and buy something for the whole family, which a TV set fell into that category, and away we go. But I think, like I said, I think, we've asked me that question before about the road funds. And right now, the way the people that are seated, that are now commissioners, that's the decision they made. And you know what? That's the decision that the people are going to have to live with.
It's about law enforcement funding. Mike has a question for you, sir.
Yeah. I think it's a likely scenario that in starting, around January of next year, there will be a launch for another levy. With the obvious leverage being if you don't pass this levy because of the alleged fiscal cliff here that's coming in 2017, mid 2017, that the jail is going to have to close.
Absolutely, they're going to say that. Yes.
Yeah, and so under those circumstances, let's say that there is a levy and the levy fails. What is your next step?
I guess you close the jail if that's the way they got it figured out. But I think there's other ways. As far as I'm concerned, like I say, and I've mentioned it before. And there are basically 120 beds that are sitting over there idle, and we've established the monetary figure that $972,000 buys 30 beds. I would say get a hold of, and this is through the sheriff because the sheriff runs the jail, but this sheriff should maybe call Jackson County and say, "Would you like to rent some beds from me? They're $1 million for 30 beds for a year." And see if you can rent out the other 120 jail beds.
I think that's a good plan.
And that would go directly to the jail. Doesn't have to go anywhere but the jail. And, maybe that's an idea. These are different ideas and different ways to look at things. That's where we get back to the management, different management skills and different management styles. I have a tendency after being in business for myself, and I'll go right back to repeat myself, I have to look at a problem from many, many different ways. If I need to buy a truck for the sheet metal department, I may have to take out a loan from the service department side of the budget, from the service department side of the profit picture, and say, I got to buy this truck. And it has to go to the sheet metal department. They go, okay, fine, but I don't punish them for that. So there's, these are things that need to be done. And like I say, when you're in business for yourself, as Mike has just said, on a couple of occasions, it's a whole different thing than if you are a career politician or, work for the government or work for a large corporation where you really didn't have anything other than go home on Friday night and fire up the barbecue and watch football on Saturday and Sunday. And then on Monday morning, on your way to work, you try to ramp up so that you're at least halfway up to speed by the time you go in. Because of the independent businessman, he's been living that all weekend. I have made the statement over and over again that well, all the years that I was in business, that when my guys came into work at 8 o'clock in the morning, I was already there. I'd been there since 6:30 or 7 o'clock. Coffee pot was on, lights were on, heat's up, everything's ready to go, and I'm ready to turn to and commence shift work. And I'm there at 7 o'clock at night, or 6:30 or 5:30, whenever they go home. I'm still sitting at my desk. I might be figuring a set of plans. I might be trying to misbalance the checkbook, or where am I going to, ordering parts for the next day. And even if they come in on the weekend to grab the ladder out of the shop, my ladder, by the way, company ladder, to go hang their Christmas lights, they usually find out that I'm there taking inventory, or just flat, the ordinary cleaning the shop up and policing things up, and get an idea where all my money is, in the form of inventory. So, when you put that kind of effort in, and you have to work that many hours a day, an 8-hour day is no big deal.
One of the basics that is often mentioned about the source of our problems, besides people who are saying no for additional property taxes, is a relationship with the federal government and with timber monies and ONC monies. Now, Keith Heck has basically turned over that responsibility to Simon Hare, who then works with his state organization, of which he is the vice president, and leaving it up to him, to Simon, to follow through with the federal government, and we'll see how the lawsuit goes, and et cetera, and what's going to happen with that. Would you take a different approach to this relationship with the federal government and to the bills that they owe us, to the contract that they've signed with our county? Would you take a different approach, a more proactive approach than Keith Heck has?
Well, I think here's one of the things that going to the ONC, and the ONC's strength is going to come from the fact that all the ONC counties are on one page. For Josephine County to say, okay, we're going to pony up, hire a lawyer, and sue the federal government, you will never get anywhere with that. Dale, you know it, and I know it. But as a collective of all the ONC counties, and that's what Simon Hare goes to the meeting, and they sit down as a collective group of ONC counties, which is hard for them all to get together, because the northern part of ONC, they don't really have the problems we do. Unfortunately, when they increased the board footage, to be able to cut board footage, all the cutting was done up in the Springfield and Eugene area, and all of the reserve and keeping it in limbo was in the southern end. All the jobs that's associated with the timber industry are in the logging, timber fallers, timber management, timber cruisers, the mill, the people who work in the mill, the people who haul the lumber in and out of here and process the lumber and process the logs. All of that is where your job creation is done. We're left out of that loop. We should have been a little bit more specific when we asked to increase board footage. We should have said, okay, how is it going to be split up? And they said, and they wouldn't have told. They would have told us, say, of course, maybe they did. They said, oh, yeah, well, all the reserve, why it's going to be spread equally. And it didn't turn out that way, did it? But here's the thing. One of the things that we do need to understand, and this is very basic, is that when we sue the federal government becomes the defendant. And when we sue, we're going to go before a federal judge, and that federal judge becomes then the defendant. And as long as we have to it'll finally be heard by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, guess what? Nothing gets by that Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals that is in the timber industry's favor.
True.
So it's an uphill battle, but that's why I stress that, is Keith Heck or is Dan DeYoung or is Simon Hare or Cheryl Walker or Lily Morgan or Bill Hunker, what are you going to do? You're going to stand up and lead the charge and jump on that steed and go out across the field wielding my sword and blowing the trumpet? You know what? I think I would like to say, you know what? I want to sit down with my soldiers, which are all the ONC counties, and have a real serious game plan, because with the strength is going to be in the fact that all the ONC counties work together, and then they will be heard. I don't know if they'll be heard all the way to Washington, D.C., because I'm very skeptical that they're even heard as far as the desk of Peter DeFazio and Ron Wyden. I don't even know if they're listening. So there's my struggle there. But, am I going to wield a magic wand, on January 1st? Absolutely not.
No, not asking that.
I'm going to be wanting to know all the history. And, maybe there's something here that we're missing that's plain as the nose on our face, right in front of our face.
Oh, well, I'll tell you that I personally believe that the pursuit of this issue legally it takes many years by design and costs oodles and oodles of money by design, and I think that's a fool's errand. I personally believe that this is a political issue. The ONC counties need to be directly lobbying politicians who are accountable to the people of Oregon and are ideologically sympathetic to our cause of being essentially oppressed. The federal government has their boot on our neck. I don't think that is, an exaggerating statement.
No, I agree. I agree with you wholeheartedly. The federal government has their boot on the back of the neck. I'm sure you do understand it. We don't count out here in Oregon. Yeah. I mean, if you heard anything on the news about what Oregon's, electorates and delegates are going to go to in the national election, absolutely not. We're not on anybody's radar out here until it comes to timber. And then you get the people in New York saying, well, I want you to save all that timber for my grandkids and my grandkids. And they'll never come out here and see how beautiful it is. They completely ignore the fact that Oregon has been in the timber management business for years upon years upon years.
Yeah.
And you know what? They completely ignore that. I believe it was one of the gentlemen that speaks every once in a while. Back east, when you talk to the people back east and the lobbyists, I believe it was Bill Urtel when he was on the trail. And he called back there and says, yeah, we want to do something out in Oregon. They said, oh, no, you guys don't want a log out there. You're perfectly happy with just smelling the Doug fir every morning when you get up. You really don't want a log. That's what they're doing back there. When we decided to load up the logging trucks years ago and drive all the way, when the loggers drove all the way with loaded logging trucks, they're not designed to do that. They were going to Washington D.C. to lobby.
Right.
And did anybody from the coal industry, did they climb on board and say, hey, we're going with you? We're going to make a stand and we're going to be heard, by jingles, because you know what? The coal industry never thought that they would be next, and now they are.
They were. That's right.
Now the natural gas industry is thinking, well, when the coal industry's gone, we're going to have a captive audience. Well, the natural gas industry better pay attention because they're next. Because the environmentalists will not quit until we're in the dark and it's damn cold.
Well, how many local politicians went with them, by the way? Okay.
Final. I don't know. That was 25 years ago, and I read.
No, and here, Dale, let me just
keeping my business afloat, and I had a family to raise and pay for college.
Yeah, let me just throw in real quick that never ignore it when they're killing the Jew that lives next door, because just because you're not a Jew doesn't mean they ain't coming for you next, and that's absolutely perfectly right.
We're all in this together, and when you get down to the melting pot, we're all in this together. Now, we each may have a little corner of the field, but we're all on the field, aren't we?
Yeah.
And field, we're going to get rolled up with it if we don't stand up collectively. Like Josephine County, we don't get to log much. Curry County doesn't get to log much. And so on. It's really affecting us down there. But we have to take that message to the rest of the ONC counties. Now, you're going to get up around Springfield there, and they go, we really don't want to rock the boat here because you know what?
Right.
We kind of like the situation we have. We have to get them on board, okay? That's tough to do. It's tough to do and I'll get back to the transportation side of it because I'm on the Rogue Valley Area Commission on Transportation. And we are outvoted in the Rogue Valley Act here in Southern Oregon. We are outvoted by Jackson County, 22 votes to 7 in Josephine County. Now, do you think for 1 minute that Josephine County is going to get even close to as many projects as Jackson County gets? No. But when it comes time to need those votes, it is up to this. And I've watched Simon do it. I've done it myself. I've watched Darren Fowler do it. We go into that meeting way outnumbered. And it is our job to convince people like Sid DeBoer and and Alan DeBoer and Al Dinsmore and John Biles and people like that are in the Medford Coalition in the Jackson County side of RVAC, that it is in the best interest of Oregon's transportation system to do this project in Josephine County. And that can be done because we've done it and brought money home for Exit 61 and the bridge out there at across the Applegate, the climbing lanes on Merle Hill. Those are all projects that were brought home here up against the big projects that are done over Medford. So it can be done, but it's a tough sell, and you've got to have somebody in the room. That's vocal and can how do I say it? Portray this thing in a different, so that people leave their jurisdictions at the door, and that's what needs to happen at ONC. They need to leave their jurisdiction at the door and become a member of the ONC County. That's what I'm going to be after. I want to congregate those, keep those people, get them concentrated on one focus, and then you will be heard, I think, at the state level. And you've got to be heard at the state level. You're never going to get heard at the federal level, I can guarantee.
Final question for you.
On board.
Final question for you, Dan, because you've got to go on to your next meeting.
Yes, I do.
You're running for this office that Keith Eck is already in.
Yeah.
You obviously then feel that there's a change that's needed, or you wouldn't be running. What is that change that's needed that you're going to do?
Here again, I'll go right back to it. I will go right back to it. I have a different management style than Keith Eck does because of our background. His management style works I could be in a situation where his management style works a heck of a lot better than mine, because you know what? I really don't like asking people for money. I really don't. I've always been a person that towed my own rope, and I feel, even on the campaign trail, people, you need to ask for campaign donations. I struggle with that. I'm sorry, I do. And, and to that end, if this is a money game, maybe I really don't want to get in it anyway, but I do. I want the job, and I think we're going to find that there is a difference between Keith Eck and myself. I'm not saying that his management style is wrong, but it may be not the best fit for Board of County Commissioners. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yes, and thank you very much for spending some time with us. What we're hoping is that 2 weeks from now, 2 weeks from Monday would be the 4th of July. That's maybe not going to work for you, but 2 weeks from today is the 5th of July. And we'd like to invite you back on to ask you some questions about other kinds of things. And we'll ask the same questions of the other candidates as well. So we hope that we can arrange that with you.
Like I said, when we get closer, you know how I am. I've missed a couple of my appointments that I agreed to do because of other things that were in. And a lot of it, one of them was I was on the road, and I don't need a ticket for a cell phone because that'd go viral, so I don't want that either. So anyway.
Well, it hasn't affected Keith Eck breaking the law. Okay. But yes. Okay. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you again, Mike. And we appreciate it. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Goodbye, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Mike?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I think it was a productive evening. We got a lot out there. We talked about a lot of stuff, and I'll let the viewers be the judge on that. We'll discuss it more at a later point in time that will let people digest what they've absorbed here. A lot of information. I think a lot of information that helps people in their decision-making process.
Absolutely. And we're going to continue doing this with Bill Hunker and also with Lily Morgan. So you'll get a chance to see. I think it was pretty obvious. There were a couple places there where he's going to be the same as Keith Eck. Exactly the same. And there's a couple of places where he would be different than Keith Eck. And so this should help you, we hope, make a decision about which direction to go. That's what we do on this show. Thank you very much for your time. Good evening.